Looking back into what we heard from many people here and what we experienced ourselves, one can say that myself, I'm very much a product of the big changes and hopes of the 1980s. Like Alina Mungio PPD talked this morning, in the 1980s as a student and as a young journalist, I had the possibility to understand much better what it means to live in a democracy and what it means to have a free country. I experienced the big changes of 1988 to 1992 from the other side of the Iron Curtain, but I had the possibility as a young student to take a night train from Zurich to Budapest, to Prague and to Berlin, and to meet with people, young people who couldn't enjoy these kind of freedoms but were very hungry for it. And then in the late 1980s, I had the privilege to work for the Swedish National Radio Foreign Service, and we had programs with the Baltic countries, with Poland, with East Germany. We even could have telephone calls from people in the GDR talking with us. They couldn't call to Western Germany, but they could call to Sweden. And we had a lot of these kind of interesting discussions, and also the understanding why it is so important to have democracy. So after 1991, 1992, together with many others also in this room, we established a network called Eurotopia, which was basically a vision about a transnational participatory and direct democracy in Europe. And we gathered more than 20 times for assemblies like that. But at that time, you couldn't send an email or have a website. So what we did, we were gathering newspapers from all over Europe, wherever we were, and reading the letters to the editors. And wherever a person wrote about democracy and about their hopes, we contacted them and invited them to this assembly. So it was a very manual process, but it was a very encouraging process because we understood and learned that we need to understand much better how democracy works, how we can improve democracy, what it needs to have a good participation or even citizenship. So during these 20 assemblies, we developed criteria for participatory and direct democracy, and this led in 2002 to the first so-called report on citizen lawmaking, on direct democracy in Europe, where we ranked all the European countries according to this criteria. But as soon as we presented this report, we also understood we need to know much better how we can compare our tools, how we can measure them, how we can validate them, these different varieties. So at that time, we understood we need to start first to understand better what's existing in different countries. In 2002, and we said when we presented this report in 2002, this is just the beginning. I couldn't understand it would take 22 years until we would be able to present a next similar report, but there are we now, because at that time, then we developed first a typology of participatory and direct democracy around the world, and we developed a tool how to gather all the tools from around the world within the navigator to direct democracy, which was established at the very same time as we had the first global forum in Switzerland in 2008. So since then, during 16 years, we were continuing this work. We had, together with all our partners and hosts, Democracy International, Swiss Democracy Foundation, many universities, we had such a fruitful work to develop this kind of tools, because again, still today, we are sometimes discussing about different tools. We get, at every meeting, we get a question from Erwin Mayer about the question about participatory and direct democracy. We try to answer that, but it's not so easy. And now, today, we are very pleased because the navigator to direct democracy has become such a useful tool. We have gathered all the legal designs from all over the world on all levels, basically, in this database, which you can access. But now we go the next step. We go the step to validate them, to see how is the state of global participatory and direct democracy there. And for this reason, I'm very glad that I think it was in Rome or in Taiwan that these two excellent researchers and professors came up and started to work with us, and they are now the leaders and the co-authors for the first Global State of Direct Democracy report. First, here we have Clara Egger. She is a political scientist, professor of global governance at the University of Rotterdam. And she was also, in fact, in 2022, challenging Emmanuel Macron or Marine Le Pen for the presidency of France with a nice party, Espoir Ric, which means basically the hope of direct democracy. And we have Raul Magni Berton. He's also a professor of political science at Católica University of Lille. And he's original from Italy. And he has taught in many places, in Montreal, in Geneva, in Torino, in Stuttgart. So you are really like having a global perspective on these issues, but also a strong commitment to the idea of democracy and direct democracy. So you will have now 15 minutes to present this first report, and then we will get 4 other professors to comment on that before we have a conversation. It's important to say that this first Global State of Democracy, this is a preview, this is a draft, this is not yet published. So you are very much part of the making of this report. So take this responsibility, and you have the floor. Thank you very much.
I don't know how to move the slides. Yeah, excellent. So I just say, next slides, please. Then it will work. Okay, perfect. Thanks a lot. Welcome. We are very, very pleased to share with you this first Global State of Direct Democracy report. The idea is to have a yearly edition. So here we will present the content of the first edition, but of course we are really looking forward to your feedback, to things you would like also to see included. We'll do a bit of expectation management, right? We are only 2, so we can't also just take all the requests, but we will consider all your feedback carefully to improve also the next version of this report, make it more useful for you and for our community. So I think Bruno presented very well the history of this report. I will start maybe by telling you what you will be able to find. I don't know what, am I ill-fated? Yeah, that's the only one. Okay, so this is the content for this initial version. There are 7 chapters. It's written in a, I was told it's written in a user-friendly manner, so the idea is to make it also broadly accessible. And we will also work in preparing translations, right, of the report. Currently it is only in English, but in the future we hope to have also a lot of other languages covered. If you're willing to help us with translating the report in Chinese, in Arabic, in Spanish, we are really looking forward to receiving your support. So the first chapter of the report just presents the existing databases, trying to also map what direct democracy is about. So there is a bit of a comparison. We also present the past reports. Bruno mentioned some, but there have been a few reports, not yearly report, but some report documenting that. And we present, of course, the Direct Democracy Navigator, what is unique about it, and why it is so comprehensive in mapping out the state of direct democracy globally. Then there is a conceptual section that Raul will have the duty to explain the second chapter, which is the idea is to propose a way of classifying direct democracy instruments based on existing typology, but a way that allows to explain why we see so different practices in reality and different effects of global democracy. This is still an open topic in current research, but we try to also provide our small contribution to that debate. Chapter 3 is really the mapping. So where are direct democracy instruments implemented? How do they work? What are the countries that vote often, countries that vote less often, and why? And then chapter 4 focuses on recent trends. So you have a lot of scholarly publication reports looking at the long history, right? 10 years, 20 years, even sometimes more. Here we look at a time frame of 5 years, right? What happened in the last 5 years, and I will provide you with a few insights about it. We, of course, shed light on the votes that took place in 2023. And we also comment on the scientific evidence, right? Studies that were published in English on direct democracy in 2023. So you will find all the latest publications in English on direct democracy, and it's quite useful to also understand what are the core issues that are being discussed, right? And then we end with a chapter which is more of a conclusion, which focuses on development to follow in 2024, so countries where we can expect something to happen. If you think that your country should be included, please come to us. We're very happy to do so. This is your turn.
Thank you, Clara. Hello. So I will start with the main challenge of this kind of report, that is the conceptualization of direct democracy, because there is a quite consensual distinction in identifying single instrument or institution of direct democracy, at least in academic research. But there is no consensus on what is more democratic, what is more important. So this is the idea here. So we are based on three main questions. The first question is about the hierarchy of norms. Who is more important, citizens or parliament? In other words, when decision made by citizens and decision made by parliament contradict each other, which prevails? This is the first question. So there are two types in the world. The first type is when citizen decision made directly by citizens are more important, and they are usually directly in the Constitution. So constitutional decisions are defined be made by citizens, and ordinary legislation is made by the parliament. This hierarchy is consistent with the classic principles of liberal democracy, in which decisions which are more inclusive and therefore also more slower, have to prevail over decisions that are faster. That's why parliaments needs to be more important, more prominent compared to the governments. And this is, for example, an issue for backsliding. In general, recent backsliding process consists in giving more power to executive compared to the parliament. So in direct democracies, the citizens are even slower and even inclusive, so they are more important. The second type is when citizens only can change ordinary legislation, and therefore the parliament is more important. So this is the first distinction. The second point, the second question is what means decide. So usually in democratic system, not only direct democratic, but in every system, a decision includes the initiative, who can initiate a proposal, and veto, who can veto a proposal, say yes or no. So the question is, what kind of right citizens have here? So we distinguish next, yeah. No, sorry, I'm very bad. No. Sorry, I was... yeah, so we distinguish between the mechanism of direct democracy that give each citizen the right to initiative, and they are classic: agenda initiative, non-binding citizen initiative referendum, and of course the most important, which is the citizens initiated constitutional amendment, according to the first point. So we call it citizens' initiatives, very classic. The second point is the right to veto. So we have a mandatory referendum, suspensive, abrogative, etc., rejective in general referendums. And these are veto rights for citizens. They can say no. And finally, the third group is when citizens vote, but they are neither initiative rights nor veto rights. And this is when the authority can initiate a vote. So they don't decide which vote they want to initiate, and they don't decide if they have the right to veto. So that's it. No, sorry, we have a third point. This is very classic, but the accessibility of direct democracy. So we have already many studies on that. If it is easy or not to have access to direct democracy. So these three principles allow us to classify the top 5 in each system. The first is mandatory referendum, which means that in the principle is no constitutional change without a vote. This is strictly mandatory. So the best example are Switzerland and Uruguay, because the referendum is the only veto power in these countries for constitutional change. And Ireland, Australia are in the second group, because the citizens have a veto power, but the parliaments also have it. So they share this right. And finally, Denmark, it is very demanding, the veto power of the parliament, so it is more important, but they also, citizens, have to vote for each constitutional change. So this is the top 5 for that. The second point is the constitutional citizens initiative, when people can submit an initiative to a ballot at constitutional level. So Switzerland is still the first one, but Liechtenstein in second, because it is much more accessible for people to initiate a constitutional referendum. They need 8%, and they are very, very little, so only 1,500 people can initiate a constitutional amendment. And in Uruguay, the threshold is quite high, but they are also little. And then the fourth and fifth are island in Oceania, and they have this right to initiate a constitutional amendment, but they are little, but the threshold is very high, sorry. So rejective referendum and legislative referendum, I let you discover it in the report, and I will stop my presentation here.
All right, maybe some highlights on the recent trends, as I was saying. So a first pattern we document is the number of votes per year. Of course, all the data sets have issues, right? So you need to take this number with a grain of salt. They may not be fully accurate. Here you see, so in the graph on this is for you the right, the distribution of votes per year, comparing subnational votes in gray and national vote in orange. So as you can see, subnational votes are more subnational votes. This is especially driven by two countries, Switzerland and the US. And in orange, you have the share of national votes in different countries. What we see in the figure is that in 2023, the number of votes was relatively limited compared to past countries. Well, it's difficult to draw any conclusion, right? Maybe next year I will present you with another pattern. What we see, though, is that it may not be reflected so well in the figure, but the evolution of national vote is much more uneven than subnational vote, right? They can decrease a lot from one year to the next. You have also some other type of information you found in the report. It's which are the countries that voted the most in the last 5 years, right? And we look at each question being posed in the referendum, right? So if it's the unit of analysis is the question. And here you see some usual suspects, right? Switzerland, the US, but also some less usual suspects. Liberia. Who knew that people in Liberia voted in the last 5 years? But also Hungary, Ecuador, or Italy, right? Of course, this is aggregated at the last 5 years, right? So that doesn't mean that these people vote every year, but there has been a year where they voted maybe 5 times, right? Next, comparing the type of instruments that were activated, I think the key conclusion we can see is that there is a huge competition between 2 types of instrument. One that gives veto power to citizens, right? Mandatory referendum were activated a lot in the last 5 years. Especially in the context of COVID-19, actually. But they compete with another instrument which gives no power at all to citizens, which are plebiscites. Plebiscites are on the rise, so people are also really activated, and especially concurrently with elections. So our guess is that in 2024, we can expect also plebiscites to be quite dominant, because they are often used by by authorities to also manipulate, frame the issue of an election in specific ways. If you have questions on the other type, I'm happy to answer. But these are really the 2 dominant tools, together with the rejective legislative initiative, what we call, so you know it as the facultative referendum, as it is called in Switzerland, that is used a lot, and the constitutional citizen initiative that is also activated often, but limited to a much smaller set of countries than the 2 others. These are the countries that voted in 2023. You have some countries in red, because they are well covered in the dataset, and some that for some reasons were not covered, that we have to also look for additional data, which is actually Venezuela and Chile. So in the report, you will find some contextual information about the votes, the outcome, what was the type of instruments. I would like to shed light on maybe 2 findings. The first finding is the fact that in last year, a lot of new constitutions were installed through a referendum, especially in Africa, so Mali, Central African Republic, by autocratic leaders. So these are constitutions that paradoxically reduce the power of citizens, because they give a lot of power to the executive, but were installed by a referendum. In most cases, the voting process was very, very contested. And then, what did I wanted to say? And Uzbekistan is in this list as well. I would like to shed the light on some countries that are often not covered in, global media, which are the so-called small state islands. They are like small dots in red. But Micronesia had a vote on changing the legal design of their mandatory referendum. And we can expect that in the future, people in Micronesia will vote more, because they decided to have a less stringent rule for the double majority. So that's good news, because, Micronesia, people in Micronesia successfully won a referendum for the first time since 1991. So that was a huge also development for the country. Development to follow. To conclude, feel free to add your own. So here the idea is I commented already on the federated state of Micronesia. We included Chile, even if after the second referendum, and David will probably speak more about it, the constitutional revision process seems to be closed. But there is also a very polarized society, still some demand for a change of the constitutional order, so things may happen either in the street, or this process may also be reactivated at some point. Right now, after 2 failed referendum, it seems that it is closed, and the last country is the Netherlands. It's not because I work there, but the Netherlands is in the process currently of changing the constitution to bring back to the country the facultative referendum, right? So the idea of the possibility at the national level for citizens to suspend the application of laws. If the process is successful, you may hear that in the next weeks, direct democracy will get back to the Netherlands. If you have other developments that you would like us to cover, feel free to just raise your hands and share your ideas. I hope this makes you feel like reading this report, using this report, commenting on it, giving us criticism. We have tough skin, so don't hesitate. And we look forward to continuing that process with you. My email will be shared, so you can also connect with us if you want to discuss and add more to that report. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, Clara and Raul. Please take a seat on the defendant's seat there, and we will now get 4, you can say, experts to comment on this report before we then enter the broader conversation. And I would like to ask the 4 expert commentators to come up and take a seat. I will present you then. Yes, I think it's really so fascinating now to see. I mean, in a way you could say what we just heard is no sensational information. Of course, everybody of us would like to go to Micronesia, but at the same time, it's really taking stock on what's going on when it comes to direct democracy around the world. As we have heard before, when it comes to provisions, most countries do have provisions for direct democracy, but when it comes to practice, when it comes to usability, it's much more limited. And that's the reason why we do also all this work, because we truly believe that direct democracy is a bridge to peace and freedom in many ways, and also an answer to many of the criticism about the state of representative democracy around the world. So now we have 4 really well-skilled experts. I will present you briefly. We have somebody who already started with us 3 days ago in the Parliament, Luciana Ghica. Here, she's a professor of political science at the University of Bucharest, with degrees from Central European University in Budapest and Oxford University. And as I have understood, you have for the last 20 years taught in a very innovative way international relations here in Bucharest and around the world. So you're very much welcome. Then we have Anna Rüttel. She's a professor of constitutional law at University of Gdansk in Poland, and have done a lot of work on direct democracy in Poland on the local, regional, national level, but also teaches globally again and again. As soon as I say something about the destination, she says, I will go there and teach. Then we have Chong-Ok Lee here on this side. She's a professor of sociology emerita from the Católica University of Daegu in South Korea. And we met in fact the first time 20 years ago in Taiwan when they introduced their first forms of direct democracy. And she was then active very much in the Korea Democracy Foundation, and has ever since then been a partner of the Global Forum, Democracy International, and served as the Minister of Gender Equality most recently in South Korea. And last but not least, David Altman. He's a professor of political science at the Catholic University of Santiago de Chile, and he's one of those guys who were inspired to work on this issue because he learned to swim in the water of Uruguay direct democracy as a very early person, and he was also one of the first to really look into the existence and the value and the developments of direct democracy worldwide in a global perspective. So that was also the reason we got in touch almost 20 years ago. So I would basically like to start. Each of you will have maximum 5 minutes. That David, you can start with your comments.
It works? It's on, okay. Well, I will not say that we must, I'm gladly you make this report. It seems that the field of studying direct democracy is mature enough for making assessment of how it works worldwide, and I congratulate you. Seriously, I had good fun reading this in the plane. So I will rapidly mention few points, just a few points that you might be interested in contemplating for this or future editions of this report. The first aspect that caught my attention is that you claim that the focus of this report is placed on direct democracy institutions at the national level in sovereign countries. But in the middle of the road, you use a lot of time and pages on dealing with subnational levels. I would leave this dimension aside, not because it's not important, but because I'm not sure you are covering all subnational MDDs that happen in the world. You are concentrating in the US and Switzerland, but you are not talking about Argentina, Spain, Mexico, etc. So unless you are sure you cover the whole world, I would leave this subnational decision aside. Also, you mentioned that most of your data comes from C2D, which is a fantastic database on direct democracy, but you must be aware that there is an important lag on time since a vote is held in any of these countries, and then it's included in the database. And that's why actually you recognize that in page 44 when you say, well, we didn't find information on Venezuela and this and that. So I will try other uses. I will try to use other databases for direct democracy, like for instance, the database for search engine on direct democracy, SUD, right? By the way, at VDEM, we do systematically cover 4 larger types of MDDs, which are popular initiatives, rejective or abrogative referendums, and mandatory referendums, and plebiscites, right? So the report that you mentioned quite a couple of times, the Tunnel Lurman, it's just a particular brief, but it's not the database. In the database, we have everything. So, more substantially, you're using a quite lax definition of direct democracy, which is perfectly fine. But I would be aware a bit more on fusing extremely different categories into a unique category like agenda initiatives and popular initiatives. Those are different animals, and they are used in absolutely different contexts for different purposes. For some people, me included, agenda initiative or petitions are not direct democratic by definition. They're important, but technically there is no consensus that they belong to the world of direct democracy. They belong to the world of participatory democracy, deliberative democracy. But direct democracy, it's we can discuss about that. So then I have some. I lost my track here, blah, 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 blah. I'm kind of confused in the lexicon that you use, in the taxonomies. For instance, when you defined a legislative citizens initiative, you mentioned which allows citizens who collect enough signatures to trigger a binding referendum or the legislative proposal. So, if I were you, I would definitely openly use the Swiss terminology. I guess everyone who studies direct democracy in one way or another has to deal with Switzerland. That's the gold standard of direct democracy, and I think all scholars go and always refer to Switzerland. So, therefore, I would use Swiss terminological definitions on what different institutions are. Referendums, popular initiatives, mandatory referendums, fiscal referendums, etc. I wouldn't do not separate fiscal and other type of referendums. I could put all of them in referendums, but no mandatory. Okay, 1 minute left. So, thank you. Finally, other little questions. One of the problems when we count referendums, a traditional problems that we have, is that we don't pay attention enough for preemptive negotiations that actually the existence of a referendum might trigger. These are called usually as the indirect effects of direct democracy, or the paradoxical effects of direct democracy, as I call them. So counting the amount of MDDs does not necessarily reflect how we citizens can influence our lives democratically. And that's a problem when we count. Why? Because if the referendums are extremely important, I'm afraid of a referendum as a government, so I call the parties that might call for a referendum to a table of negotiation. If the negotiations are successful, then I integrate their opinions, and there is no need for a referendum. And actually, in that country, the mere existence of a referendum makes the referendum unnecessary.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's a... Yes. You have seen, I'm very tolerant. 30 seconds over time. So, yes. I love you. Yeah. Anna.
Okay, thank you. I will be short. I will try to be short. So thank you very much for inviting me to commenting that. I also was lucky to get the report a week ago, and I read it carefully on the plane as David. And it was a bit of a travel back for me, because I remember the beginning of The Navigator. There was a conference in Brussels, I think, about 18 years ago. And I remember Klaus Hoffmann to ask me to respond on Poland and so on. And I also made some reports for IDEA in Stockholm on Central European countries. And now we can see the results after so many years. You mentioned, Clara, about 2,000 entries, and yes, so this is very nice to see that. And I like this. I agree with David with most his remarks. And what is important for me is this conceptual work that you mentioned, because it's very important. I remember also another conference in Berlin. I met Demokratie for the first time, or 20 years ago. And there was a presentation on popular initiative, citizens' initiative. I don't remember the speaker, sorry. But there was a table concerning European experiences, and there was no Poland. So that was my first foreign conference on direct democracy, and so I said at the discussion, okay, but there is also popular initiative, citizens' initiative in Poland, and the response was, yeah, we know that, but it is not a popular initiative. So I said, oh, so what's that? This is agenda initiative. Yeah, so it opened my eyes, and I think that at the moment, a lot of people from Poland who take your work and see that you call what we say referenda plebiscite, yes? So they will also be surprised at the beginning, and it will be very inspiring, because it's like talking a lot about direct democracy. They say that our constitution is in Poland, very pro-direct democracy, referenda, initiative, and so on. But when you try to think carefully about that, so you get to the point that there is no direct democracy, and the rule of sovereignty of the people you mentioned at the beginning, yes, so it is not implemented at all, yes, so this is very important to show people what direct democracy should be, how we should understand. I agree with you that, yes, that type, that you cannot decide, yes, this is not direct democracy. And the report is very inspiring. I think that this is a kind of starting point for the discussion. And when I was reading that, I had, oh my God, but I don't agree with this and this, because it looks different in Poland. Like you have such finding like collecting period of signatures, that it can't be, that if this is too short, so this is very difficult for the organization to make such initiative. A few years ago, we worked on the amendments to the law on popular initiative in Polish, popular initiative in Poland, and our proposal was to extend the period from 3 months to half a year. But then we consulted that with the organizations, and they said, no, you shouldn't do that, because this is our, in Poland, voluntary work. And for us, it's much easier to motivate people to be active for 3 months and to launch very concise initiative than to make it for half a year. because some people would not be so interested. Yes, so we should think about that. And then about paper format makes it easier for petitioners. No, in Poland it is not. This is the main barrier, because nobody in Poland nowadays want to sign something to give your data in public, in the street. Yes, so we are working on the electronic way as the only one. Or the last thing about because you mentioned our examples from the last year of referenda, and it's also about the turnout, like 50% quorum turnout can be. It encourages to discuss the issue as little as possible. Voters forget to make voters forget that the referendum is being held. So it was not true in Poland. Yes, so it was the opposite, because we had that 50%. So we were discussing a lot. Yes, so even in social media, messages were sent to people, don't go, think twice if you really want to take part in this referendum. So people were very, very aware of that. And we had this referendum with elections, so the turnout in elections was 74, but in referenda it was 40. So it means that the discussion was very effective.
Thank you very much.
Yes, so we should consult this.
Yeah. John,
thank you. So I will very briefly to say about the good point, because we all share those, and also I learned a lot about your report, but I want to make it improved for the future readers for this book. So first I want to highlight I was more dependent on navigator. So navigate means something moving. So, but the title of State of Democracy is more static. So, but your approach is you try to be more added value. So then. You cover the global, national, and subnational, then it is quite some kind of architectural and constructive way. So in that sense, the title is, for me, it is not that much include that rich content of your report. And the second one is that it is related with the format is your number 6 part, because yours is a 5 years approach. First started with the 5 years approach, and then 2023 1 year approach, and then later on the academic research summarization, and most of academic research is based on for the long-term some kind of database analysis. So some kind of that kind of, so you can be better to academic implications in the forefront. Because we are, or otherwise, so if the reader are only focused on 2020, because it is going to be an annual report. So starting with 2023, so I'm thinking about the 24 report and the 25 report, and everybody showed interest that year first. Then, but there are so many academic typological explanations. I think that so you can change the order of the report for the reader friendly, and also I'm thinking about the annual report try to help the people the changes, but if based on your conceptualization added value too much on constitutional level, then it is very difficult to see the changes. So in that sense, the real bottom-up approach for because we are all activists coming from different worlds, so something is which is more, we can see our achievement is related with the subnational level. So in that sense, some of the we can see through the report some of the progressive journey for us to go. So that was what I found. Because of this year it is okay, but when we publish it annually, so we need some parameters to see the changes very visibly. So, and also, and so one small point is we have the previous navigator, the typology is quite simple. So we can see, so I was learned also plebiscite and social movement direct action is not exactly direct democracy. Some of the learning process which is not really direct democracy, but in your integrative approaches, it is very difficult to some kind of differentiate which one is more normatively better way. So, but yours is more near. No. So, and I also want you to highlight more focus on popular sovereignty. So, because all the the philosophical basis of popular sovereignty, you have cited Condorcet only, but related on the deep historical background, not only modern period, but also pre-modern period. Why we should reflect popular sovereignty in what way? That is the one thing we can persuade the existing politicians to be more normatively change current system. So, but there are so many things, but because of time limit, I really appreciate your some kind of research. But I want to make it ours. That's why I want to pinpoint it to something. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, I don't want to stress anybody here. Luciana.
Okay, thank you. I'm here partly also due to some historical events. First of all, 1989, I was happy enough and lucky enough, like very few people in the world, to live through a regime change to democracy, not the other way around, hopefully. The other major event for me was in the second half of the 90s when our government announced that high school students would have to pass the exam in 7 subjects instead of 4. I was in the final year and we were all in the street. And at that time, I wanted to be a movie director. And that event actually changed my whole career path. Through a series of events that led to the something that could be a movie, I arrived to negotiate, to be part of the pupils negotiating directly with the Prime Minister. And my argument was that we cannot change the rules during the game. That's part of democracy. And reflecting about this path that, this event that changed my career, I would ask myself, this was an argument that was very much floating around at that time in the transition period. Would that be an element of direct dialogue on democracy or not? And how can we take into account other stakeholders than just simple citizens? If we are taking other areas, not just the regular political interaction, would we gain from understanding direct democracy a little bit better? Perhaps this is for future reports. However, now since you focused only on the formal part, I'm also wondering whether just measuring whether different types of referenda and initiatives are enough is just about a form. Shouldn't we also take into account the content? For instance, in Romania, about 6 years ago, we had a referendum that was actually trying to restrict rights. Is this a form of, should we actually count this as direct democracy or not? Then another issue that is very much related to something that we all experience is related to emergency situations. We all experienced that during COVID. And there were forms of direct engagements related to strengthening democracy or, on the contrary, diminishing the level of democracy. So instead of thinking about direct democracy, we should perhaps think about the direct involvement of citizens in strengthening democracy. That's probably more relevant. And not only in the COVID-19 situation I'm thinking, but I'm thinking at the specific case, for instance, of Ukraine, which is still an emergency situation. And at the same time, we have a lot of indicators that show us that democratic elements are consolidating there through processes that we haven't been familiar with so far, through innovative things that are not just mimicking other ideas that they were found somewhere else. So I think that we should take into account also maybe contexts that are not classic democracies. And that goes to my next remark about trying to find democratic elements, including related to classic direct democracy, in contexts that are not democratic. I think that could help us actually find more interesting things about how we can strengthen democracy. But perhaps that's just my personal interest, because I lived through that moment of 1989, and I'm still puzzled how lucky we are. And I'm still, as a political scientist, I'm still struggling to understand how we can actually go from authoritarianism to democracy. And here, one of the major points that I think that could be actually integrated in the current report is about an issue that has been constantly, and that's the last thing, on the agenda during the last 25 years, that of the level of political trust. And how political trust affects the forms and use of direct democracy instruments. We've been working on a project like that, and if you can just add just show the website at the technical.
Excuse me.
Okay. We are in the middle of it. No, not that one. It's called Through Them, Trust in European Democracy, but even if it's mostly focused on Europe, yes, we are trying to, yeah, perfect, thank you. We are trying to get more on recontextualizing trust, and we have a preliminary data that show that in the last 25 years, there is a huge rise in researching trust, including in matters related to direct democracy. So here I think it will be a huge audience for what you're doing. But we're also having preliminary data on Romania with interviews, and that's really my last point. We are noticing a closing of the political space, and everybody that we interviewed from different political parties, different sectors, different stakeholders talk about the importance of talking directly to the citizens, and they are familiar with direct democracy tools. However, nobody really knows how to do it, and most people, not only from Romania, but all over the world, are telling us, should we just mimic Swiss elements, or should we actually think about the spirit of the Swiss direct democracy and reflect about what these elements could bring to democracy. So that's my last remark. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Already this discussion is much broader. I will now go like that. I will take 6, maximum 1 minute statements from the room, from all sides, and as diverse as possible. Then you have one last wish each to the authors. And then you... One what? One last wish. Wish? Yeah. Wish? Yes. Wish. And then you have a few minutes for your takeaways. So let's see. We start in the...
It doesn't mean the last wish. Yes.
And I will hold the microphone.
You hold the microphone. Yeah. Thank you very much. One about logistics. Can we see this report somewhere? Do you have a link or a QR code? Because you play tennis, but we don't see the ball, actually. The second, I relate to the point of Mrs. Ghica. Not all referenda are the same. Plebiscites are instruments of autocrats in these new proliferating illiberal regimes. She mentioned an example in Romania. There are others in the region. If we just count them, ignoring the political context, I'm not sure we are really talking about democracy, especially those who are initiated from the top of the government with political purposes in mind.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Yes. Yeah, I go back. So I come here. Not on participatory democracy, no.
No. A short question. I'm very interested in who made the rules. Is it included in the report, or can we include it in the report? Normally, the direct democracy rules are done in the constitution. But who has the hands on the constitution? This, if this would be possible, if it is a parliamentarian idea, a government idea, or if the peoples have their hands on, like in the Swiss model, that would be interesting for me. Because normally, if it is the constitution is written top down, there are very bad rules for direct democracy. If the people have their hands on the constitution, it's easily accessible.
Thank you. Coming on the other side. Okay.
Thank you. Direct democracy puts a huge focus on citizens. Yet, when we talk about it, we talk all about we talk so much more about the institutional part. So I'm trying to ask. Of course, I haven't seen the report, so I'm looking forward to that. But I'm trying to ask if you have put a focus on citizens. I think maybe one interesting insight from the Romanian experience and probably of the region is that if one day totalitarianism ends and the next day democracy begins, subjects of former totalitarian regimes do not become democratically minded citizens holding democratic values. So who are these citizens in a sense, and how can we understand them better, and how can we understand how we build citizenship better? Thank you.
Thank you.
I appreciated the point about separating subnational and national if you can't capture all the subnational, but I just wanted to plug, I focus on local and regional governance, so please keep the subnational. So that's what. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I have a question. It's very specific. In Berlin, where I'm from, it's a subnational level, but I think it maybe exists at the national level. We have a kind of mix between a gender setting initiative and a legislative binding referendum or popular initiative. It's when you're not bringing a law to the ballot, but it's called an other object. So it's just a simple question, and the effect is that it's not as binding as a law. And in 2 times, we have 8 referenda in Berlin, and 2 times these other topics, they weren't really implemented because it was not as binding, and it's a problem. And maybe you can keep that in mind. And I just wanted to agree that maybe taking into account the content of the popular initiatives, especially bottom up, it would be really good for us in Germany for the argumentation for direct democracy, because there are so many assumptions and myths. And if you show that, for example, in Ecuador, there was these nice environmental initiatives. If you show these good examples, we can work really good with it. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Really quick, I would just like to stress on how important it is to maybe show a little more the limitations of direct democracy in different contexts. I will say this from the Colombian experience, where direct democracy has been really traumatic in some events. It has really deepened a lot of tensions that already existed in the country. And when we voted either or not have the peace agreement with the guerrillas FARC, and the final vote was no, and this vote was made by the people that didn't even experience the war. This has been like something that we now use really carefully, and I think that it's really hard to see how this is like an idealistic thing that we are going towards, but it really has a lot of limitations for other countries in the global south.
Thank you.
I like very much this picture of the navigator you were referring for. So my question is about those who have who make the rules have the highest power. So do you focus also on the question of who is taking care on the rules of direct democracy, and are there, like I would say, implemented learning processes or reflection processes? Because at the end, it's not about the status, but it's about what we can learn, how to do it better.
Thank you.
Yes, hello. I'm Uffe Hvidkjær from Denmark. I've been joining Global Forum 3 times now, but I think every time I'm the only Dane here. So I want you to help.
That's your mistake.
Yeah, so I just want to help you. Denmark was mentioned a few times in your report. So if I should ask the question, how is Denmark doing in direct democracy? Can you help me?
Thank you very much. A lot of points, a lot of voices. I think that's the way we want to work. And now, David, you have, excuse me? Yes, there are many other questions, but...
It's a request to keep it to 5 minutes, to keep it short.
Yeah, of course. I try, as you see. So, David, 1 minute max.
Okay, beyond love, health, and a lovely life, I wish you, first, use better data. Go beyond C2D. For instance, Marshall Island is included in the report and it's included in C2D, but there was no referendum in Marshall Island. Didn't exist. The Marshallians didn't vote, actually. It was delayed for 1 year. That's the reason why you've had such a hard time finding data. Use a more natural taxonomy, definitions. I recommend to use the Swiss case because it's the most natural for all of us. But you can use something but be extremely systematic. Do not please include illegal referendums, as in page 42. Illegal referendums could be a messy category because everything could be called an illegal referendum if we gather here and we vote on something. It might be an illegal referendum, I don't know. So it's a problematic category, I would leave it aside. And finally, keep going with the data on the episodes of direct democracy. The best example is Ecuador that was mentioned. I mean, it was a popular initiative, it was approved by citizens, it took 10 years to qualify this popular initiative, it was a long story. But the President Lasso said, okay, that's fine, I lost, so what? And the oil exploitation in that national park, Chassouni, it's keep going on, so it had no effect whatsoever. So sometimes you have to be a little more delicate in differentiating the effects of the vote and how authorities abide by the decisions.
Thank you. Thank you very much. That was 6 wishes, but that's okay. Yeah.
Okay, I have a wish and an invitation. I wish you to have more time to have proper feedback for the future. So that's why we invite you and all those who would like to join us at the University of Bucharest in September 19 to 21st. We're having the 9th International Conference on Political Research, which is dedicated to trust this year, actually. So it's really very important. And the last day is the 21st of September, which is the International Day of Peace, where we are going to have also diplomats from different parts of the world, academics talking about how we can do such things. So it's an invitation to continue the conversation so that the future reports are even more solid and better known across the world. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anna?
Yes, I would like to wish you to find responsive national experts from the countries you want to cover in the report, because when we write about institutions to be implemented in different countries, so even if this is formally the same institution, it will work, it will be, it will have different consequences. So it's maybe very important just to have the inside view on that. Yes, so this is my wish.
Thank you.
Okay, same. According to your report, all the Asian countries are boxed in 87, late 80s yet about their constitution reform, but there are many trials and errors also other than constitutional changes. So covering more stories from that side also, and then I advise you to make a certain directory. But as a research, it is difficult. Someone who can report to you make a certain rich directory based on the story also, and also think about because I see your State of Democracy report is a kind of a landscape picture, but within that landscape, we need some people and animals also, not only woods and trees. And so in that sense, we see the polarization of participation also, and also how how unequal distribution of citizenship sector and activist role of activism. So that was my comment.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And now, basically, you have no time to answer, but you can you can express yourself shortly. Yeah.
Thank you very much for this rich discussion. I would like just one point to develop on one point. This report is like it's not like a movie. It's like a series. This is the first season, correct? Each year it will develop other things. So I have in mind many information to give, especially how democratic institution born. And we have here Kim Graves, who is doing a PhD on exactly this question. So she will be included. And the other point is more on the limit of the direct democracy and the word to be used. So we are interested to have your preferred options.
Thank you.
Very short, thank you. I think the idea was also to trigger a discussion, so we're very happy to see that interest. Many ideas on how to take into account your feedback. You also judge the next episode. And the report will be released right after the forum, so you can have it and look at it. And please be in touch with us, knowing that our challenge is to keep it short. So it's not an encyclopedia, but it's really something that should also be, not too long. So, but thanks a lot for the many good feedback points and ideas. We feel really privileged to have this opportunity of sharing this with you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much. This was really encouraging. This was historic, as I said before. And I have two concluding wishes. One is something following up on what you said exactly. And it's something a good friend of us in Switzerland who was responsible for the booklet sent out to everybody ahead of votes always said, think as a philosopher, write as a farmer.